Who ran the most ruthless gang in the 1990s in Los Angeles? It wasn't the Bloods and it wasn't the Crips. It was an entire elite unit of active duty LAPD cops moonlighting as triggermen for Death Row Records. On March 18th, 1997, Studio City, Los Angeles. Studio Cities is a really nice area in LA. An undercover narcotics detective named Frank Liga is sitting at a red light in a beat-up Buick. He glances at the car next to him, a custom metallic green SUV. The driver is staring him down. Words were exchanged. The SUV cuts off Liga. A high-speed chase through the valley begins. Finally, at another red light, the driver of the SUV pulls out a .45 caliber hand gun. Frank Liga draws his own weapon, fires twice, and unalives the driver. Liga radios it in saying, "I just pow-powed a guy." When LAPD investigators arrive and search the unalive man's SUV, they find a badge. It wasn't stolen. The man bleeding out in the driver's seat was Kevin Gaines, a highly decorated LA police officer. So essentially, you had two cops shooting at each other, and Liga doesn't know why. But that wasn't even the biggest problem. When investigators ran the plates on the green SUV, it didn't belong to the Officer Gaines. It was registered to Sharitha Knight, the estranged wife of Death Row Records CEO Suge Knight. Why was a cop driving a car that belonged to Suge Knight's wife? Immediately, they realized this wasn't just a tragic case of road rage. This was the exact moment the LAPD realized a terrifying truth. The most ruthless gang in Los Angeles had infiltrated the police department. While the world thought Death Row Records was just a music label, Suge Knight was secretly employing a private army of active duty LA police cops. Officers like Kevin Gaines, Dave Mack, and Rafael Perez were moonlighting as armed enforcers to the mob Piru Bloods. And everybody knew Piru Bloods was Suge Knight's group. He ran around town in these bright red suits representing Piru. And the man allegedly coordinating this crossover between the badge and the streets, Death Row's head of security, a Compton police officer named Reggie Wright Jr. For decades, this massive web of dirty cops, missing evidence, and gang warfare buried the truth about the unaliving of Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls. But right now, in a Las Vegas courtroom, a man named Keefe D is on trial for Tupac's unaliving. And his defense strategy? Point the finger directly back at Reggie Wright Jr. and the most corrupt era in law enforcement history. And this explains why Suge Knight called into TMZ basically threatening the hell out of Keefe D. He kept saying, "Make this right for all of us." I was thinking, who the hell is all of us? But now I know the answer. The corrupt cops that was on Suge Knight's payroll. And if you know about the crooked cops, then you have to ask yourself, are the police finally trying to solve one of the biggest cases in hip-hop, or are they trying to bury their own secrets for one last time? To understand how a trial in 2026 connects to an LAPD shooting in 1997, you have to understand the sheer power of Death Row Records. In the mid-90s, Death Row wasn't just a record label, it was an empire. Suge Knight was generating hundreds of millions of dollars with stars like Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, and of course his number one seller, Tupac Shakur. But Suge Knight had a problem. He was openly affiliated with the mob Piru Bloods, which meant his artists and executives were constantly targeted by rival gangs, specifically the Southside Compton Crips. Suge needed security, but he didn't want mall security. He wanted men with tactical training, legal immunity, and most importantly, badges. Now let's talk about Reggie Wright Jr., the man that's supposed to be taking the stand during this trial. Reggie was a sworn-in police officer for the Compton Police Department, but off the clock, he served as the head security of Death Row Records, a massive, glaring conflict of interest. As a cop, Wright had access to police intelligence, gang databases, and the authority of the law. As Suge's security chief, he used those resources to protect a label ran by admitted gang members. And get this, Reggie realized that Death Row needed more muscle, so he allegedly began recruiting. But he didn't just look for tough guys, he looked for LAPD officers, specifically officers from specialized elite anti-gang unit known as Crash. Now, is he crazy or is he brilliant? I'm going to get the guys responsible for getting gangs off the streets. I'm going to get them, recruit them, and make them bad guys. Let's just be real. We want to protect Suge Knight and his drug-based organization. And something tells me that these guys weren't recruited willingly. Maybe there was some blackmail involved, because how do you flip the script that dramatically to let's get rid of all the gangs to let's be a gang for Suge Knight? And this wasn't just a few cops working the door at a nightclub. These officers were deeply embedded in the criminal underworld. Let's look at the roster. Now, we already know about Kevin Gaines. That was the cop unalived in the road rage incident driving Suge Knight's wife's car. Then there was David Mack. Mack was a respected crash officer and a former track star. But in November 1997, Mack orchestrated a brazen daylight armed robbery of Bank of America in LA, stealing $722,000. When the federal investigation finally caught him, they discovered Mack had deep ties to the mob Piru Bloods. Where did he spend the weekend after the bank heist? In Las Vegas, gambling away the stolen money with another police officer. And that other officer's name was Rafael Perez. Perez is the man who eventually exposed the entire LAPD Rampart scandal wide open. After being caught stealing 6 pounds of cocaine from an LAPD evidence locker, Perez cut a deal. He confessed to planting evidence on people, framing innocent people, unprovoked pow-pows, and perjury. Over 70 cops were implicated. Over 100 criminal convictions were overturned. It remains one of the worst police corruption scandals in American history. And sitting right at the center of this rotting department was Death Row Records. These were men guarding Suge Knight and Tupac Shakur. They were gangsters carrying LA badges. While the LAPD was dealing with the Rampart fallout, and Rampart was the name of their division, the rot was spreading south to the city of Compton. Remember, Reggie Wright Jr., Death Row's head security, while he was managing this private army of dirty LA cops, his father, Reggie Wright Sr., was the lieutenant in charge of the Compton Police Department's gang unit. I couldn't make this up if you paid me to. I mean, let's just stop for a minute and think about what I just said. The son is running security for a Bloods-affiliated record label, employing corrupt LAPD cops. The father is running the gang unit in the city where the Bloods and Crips are fighting a vicious WAR. So if your name was Keefe D and you were a Southside Compton Crip, the opposing side, how are you supposed to believe the police? You might end up doing whatever they ask you to do, like wear a wire to frame P. Diddy. Now, this doesn't mean I'm an enthusiast for Keefe D. Keefe D is Keefe D is a loser, okay? He really, really is. And I don't feel sorry for him, but I'm saying this could have been his position. And it might be a defense that they bring into this trial. Now let's fast forward and talk about a robbery homicide detective named Russell Poole. He was assigned to investigate the Biggie's unaliving. As he dug into the case, he didn't find a trail of rival rappers. He found a trail of LAPD badges. He discovered the deep ties between Death Row Records, Reggie Wright Jr., and the corrupt Crash Unit cops. Poole theorized that Suge Knight orchestrated the hit on Biggie Smalls as retaliation for Tupac, and that Knight used his network of corrupt LAPD cops, specifically Rafael Perez and David Mack, to help arrange the unaliving of the Notorious B.I.G. But when Poole brought his evidence to his superiors, he wasn't commended. He was shut down. The LAPD brass dismissed his claims. The department, already bleeding from the Rampart scandal, could not afford the PR nightmare of admitting their officers helped unalive a global superstar. Poole was eventually forced to resign in protest, and he passed away 2015 fighting to prove his theory. The waters were so muddied by dirty cops, missing evidence, and conflicts of interest that both cases went entirely cold. And this is why Keefe D's defense team is going to use the strategy that they are using the LAPD's dirty history against them. Not only that, this strategy just might work, because I've been saying since the very beginning, nobody, and I mean nobody in this case, hands are clean. And the jury just might think that these dirty cops are despicable, because we're taught not to trust drug dealers. We're taught not to believe gang members, but we're also taught trust the law. Trust our police officers. I remember my mom saying, if you get lost in the store, find a cop. I mean, it was just a real letdown reading what these cops were doing. Stealing the drug dealers' drugs, bullying people. It was just a mess. And I would say this is why I'm not going to count Keefe D out. I don't know Keefe D from a bag of marbles. I don't support him. But when I tell you guys he might get off, you guys lose your mind.
Basically, you have two.
There might be more to this case than what we know. So don't prejudge. Sit back and let's see what happens. Now, before Reggie Wright Jr. takes the stand, I think it's very important that you guys know this. In 2017, both Reggie Wright Jr. and Reggie Wright Sr. were federally indicted as part of a massive multi-agency investigation into a Los Angeles to Memphis drug trafficking and money laundering pipeline. As a result, the entire Compton Police Department, that part was just shut down. They just closed it. They didn't want to answer any questions. They didn't want to have to go to court and embarrass the police department more than they already did. But now they feel that he's qualified enough to take the stand in this Tupac trial. What? And to make matters even worse, you have two opposing officers. You've got Russell Poole, who said basically it was Suge Knight and the dirty cops that unalived Tupac Shakur. And then there's Greg Kading, and he's saying, no, it was P. Diddy that put the hit out on Tupac Shakur. In all honesty, this might be a perfect case of the blind leading the blind. I just don't see how this is going to work, okay? As I keep saying, nobody's hands are clean. None of them. However, this is what I think you guys should have known before he takes the stand. You guys needed to know about Reggie Wright Jr. So we could have that in the back of our mind as he testifies. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. Until next time, bye for now.